All right, and welcome into the Bobby Carpenter Show. And as always, we're incredibly excited to have you along with us, whether you're watching on Bally's, whether you're watching or whatever now it's going to be called, as this is moving around a little bit, whether you're watching on YouTube, somewhere across the social media verse, we are happy to have you with us and very excited here. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and make sure you leave some comments for us. I like scrolling through those, even if they're negative. Let's try to keep them on the positive side. And as always, I am sitting right here with my man, Anthony Schlegel. And Schleg's been back and forth, Jacksonville, Columbus. We've got the NFL playoffs going on. I just watched my man Campbell, if you will, and the Detroit Lions. Couple of Buckeyes up there. Jonah Jackson got nicked up in the game. You had Taylor Decker playing left tackle. I mean, just dudes kind of everywhere for Ohio State in these playoffs. Pretty nice little win. I couldn't be happier for my former team. And, Aaron Glenn, their D coordinator, it's a guy who I played with, JT Barrett is their quality control, like assistant quarterbacks coach. So a lot of Buckeyes up there. When you see like a good Midwestern team and, Detroit, I kind of liken them a little bit to the Browns. I mean, they've had a hard knock life for the last 50 years. Finally getting over the hump and watching some Buckeyes that have been there for a while help them do it. That was very refreshing to see.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love playoff football. It's that type of game, that you see from Detroit and being able to, I mean, the Bucks, right? Baker Mayfield, he was a Brown, right? Now all of a sudden he went through three different teams and it's a fit and everybody talks about the league. And why isn't this guy doing this or why isn't he doing that? He was a first round guy. Listen, man, the NFL is all about fits and he seems to have found a home down there, played well, had some really good drives. But Detroit they're a complete team, right? They don't really get rattled. Like, I mean, remember they had the one where Taylor, they said, didn't check in, but he literally was standing right by the ref checking in. They didn't care. It's like, all right, whatever, on to the next. And that's just kind of the resiliency of that team. Something that you like to see. It's here in the Midwest, though they're in the, that state up north that looks like a glove. That doesn't matter. You root for teams
they call it the mitten, dude.
The mitten. You root for guys like that. You root for Goff, right? Remember in LA, he couldn't get it done, all these negative things, and then he goes to Detroit, and now he takes them to the playoffs, and they're going to be playing in the NFC Championship game. How about that, man? That's what you love to see.
That was great. And then on the other side of the ledger, you got the AFC, and CJ Stroud's his career came to, or his season, his rookie season came to a conclusion as they weren't able to get it done. And it's unfortunate for them. They're just a little bit outmatched. Looked really good against Cleveland, and then unfortunately on Saturday night, just kind of ran out of gas against Baltimore, if you will. But CJ Stroud, I think, Schlegs, it's safe to say, and then Fields played really well this year as well. But there's always been this stigma with Ohio State quarterbacks, and it's really the only position that has had it where they don't really succeed in the NFL, and maybe they struggle a little bit. I think Ryan has done a lot to change that. Obviously, Dwayne Haskins, his untimely passing and his career wasn't going great as well, but he obviously passed away. That's a completely different situation. But the last two guys that Ryan has put in the NFL, when you look at Justin Fields, and then you look at CJ Stroud and what they were able to do, especially CJ setting all these rookie passing marks, you feel pretty darn good about Ryan Day's ability to run this offense and develop these quarterbacks.
Yeah, for the next level. And both of them completely different skill sets. And I mean, honestly, you just hopefully the Bears are probably going to move on from Justin. He's going to go somewhere, and hopefully it's
maybe. I don't know. I honestly hope that they do. I think it would be better for him, but
yes,
I mean, dude, the way he played the last half of the season, you had all of Soldier Field, chanting, "We want Justin."
They did.
I mean, it was some pretty powerful stuff, and for a young quarterback who's been up and down, who got him to 7 wins this year without a whole lot of help, I don't know. Like you said, they probably will move on from him, but I don't know if that's the right move, but it may be ultimately what's best for both of them.
And I just look at it from the player's perspective for him. I mean, he's been going through coordinators every single year that he's been in the league. That's terrible, especially when you're a young quarterback having to learn completely new offense every single year. Do they have the supporting cast that he actually needed to get the job done, especially up front? They're relying upon him to use his legs every single time to move the chains. That's terrible. And then you look at CJ down there and what DeMeco Ryans was able to do and put together. But CJ is just an elite quarterback, an elite competitor, great human. Both of them are. You like to see the success that he had, and they're going to continue to win and continue to build around him. So For Justin, I hope he does get a new opportunity somewhere that he is a fit that has a good supporting cast. But both of them, I think, are going to have a really good career moving forward.
Absolutely. So big start for the Bucks in the NFL.
Yep.
Feel good about that, especially that quarterback position. And speaking of quarterbacks, like there is a lot of movement. This transfer portal, whoa, it giveth and it taketh away. And there were some guys that obviously left, and you saw Kyle McCord leave, and we've talked about that. Chip Trayanum was probably the one that stung the most with him going down to Kentucky. But there's a lot of guys who have now entered into the portal from other schools that have ended up in Columbus, Ohio. They have jettisoned through. They hopped on into that little time machine and were shot right over here. And some big, big moves with that. So we're going to get into that on today's show. Start talking about it. I thought this show would be dominated largely when we started off the week with the hiring of Ross Bjork and making the move to bring the Texas A&M athletic director to take over for Gene Smith up here. So I thought that's what would kind of dominate it. So that was the initial news. You got some portal stuff, and then you've got Bill O'Brien joining the fray as well as the offensive coordinator. So more staff movement is going to happen. It's reported that Corey Dennis, I think, is going to stay on, role unspecified at this point. I don't know if he'll be on the field coach, maybe an analyst, or what that could potentially look like. But man, there is a lot of positivity. And so for a team Schlegs, you felt like, hey, ended on kind of a rough note. Michigan, obviously with the loss in the Cotton Bowl to Missouri. Your starting quarterback left, and people are wondering what's going on with your head coach. And it's like, hey, I tell everybody, always just pull yourself back. Let's get that 40,000-foot view of everything, and then kind of see what happens. And I think Ryan has kind of felt this sense of urgency. And you would have to say, Schlegs, they started the offseason program. This is as much momentum as I have felt for Ohio State in January, and I can't tell you how long.
Yeah, I mean, I just saw this snippet. It was like the Ohio State diehards, right? But think about this. Since that last game, they brought back 11 draft-eligible impact players. They added now 2 quarterbacks from the portal, formed arguably one of the best running back duo in college football, reeled in the freshman All-American safety that we'll talk about later, and then hired a former Power 5 and NFL head football coach to be their offensive coordinator. There's been a lot of moves. Like you said, Bob, a lot of momentum. And I think that outside looking in, remember how all the noise was, all these guys that are going to the portal. And to your point, just take a step back and catch your breath, and then just see what Ryan and Ohio State has been able to put together over the last month here for Ohio State going into 24. They do have a lot of momentum, and it's going to be a huge offseason for them, from team building to also evaluating the talent and who the best personnel is to be on the field.
Coach, they're making more moves than Pat Swayze right now, RIP. Pour one out for our guy. And we're going to talk about probably the biggest one, non-player related. And we're going to start with Bill O'Brien, his impact on this offense, coming up here next on the Bobby Carpenter Show. Bobby Carpenter Show coming at you here. So we're rounding out January, heck, almost over 1/12 of the year, Schlegs, about to be in the books. I mean, think how fast this thing goes. All of a sudden, one day you're trying to beat Michigan, you lose the Cotton Bowl, poof, the month is gone. What have the Buckeyes done? Well, Ryan Day, they felt he had to make some moves. He had to get some things. He'd been talking about, hey, do I give up play calling duties to become more of a CEO, CEO head coach, not the offensive coordinator, not the play caller. And Hartline was maybe going to call more of the plays this year. I still felt like Ryan was largely in charge of a lot of that. I think he delegated some of it to Brian as well. But since Kevin Wilson left, you haven't really felt like on the offensive side there has been that calming veteran presence, a guy who has called plays for a long time, who's also been a head coach, and a sounding board for Ryan. And if you've looked at what they've done in the coaching searches, bringing in his staff and the portal, like Ryan's got a lot of stuff going on. And we're going to get to all these signings, where the money's coming from. We've got our tailgate talk questions that are going to come up. Those are going to be fantastic from you. And I know a lot of those are centered around the recruiting world. But Bill O'Brien coming in as the offensive coordinator at The Ohio State University. When I first saw that, I was incredibly excited. Now, Schlegs, there were some people out there that were besmirching the idea, like, hey, look at Bill O'Brien. Someone called him, quote, a loser. And I responded to them on Twitter, how so? He was at New England and with Bama, and he didn't win a championship with either. I said, oh, okay, so my bad. He was the two teams that have been highly successful. And the fact that he didn't get to win a championship while he was there, it was wholly his fault. Gotcha. All right. He did coach a Heisman Trophy winner at Alabama, by the way, Bryce Young and their quarterback. I know a lot of people think very highly of him. I think very highly of him. He was in the building. He drove from Boston on like Thursday night, Friday morning, drove on in. He wanted to be in there. They thought it was going to be important for him to be there right away. He was there on Friday. You know, I talked to guys who had played for him in Houston, guys who have been around him in New England. People love him. He's fiery. He's been an NFL coach. He has a winning record. Bill O'Brien has a winning record as a head coach in the NFL. You know how hard that is? Most guys, when they're gone, like they're done because they're not winning. He was winning. They won a couple of AFC South crowns. The problem was with Bill O'Brien. He probably, and I think he would even tell you this, Bill O'Brien, the GM, let down Bill O'Brien, the head coach, maybe with some of their moves. But I thought he did a pretty good job at Alabama. He's a fiery guy. Ryan wants some fire and passion. You remember him going at it with Tom Brady on the sideline. So for me, and he also he was coach of the year of the Big Ten in 2012 when he took over that mess. They lost their first two games to Ohio University, which my brother was on that team. You know, kudos to them getting it done over there in Happy Valley. Schlegs, my brother's 1-0 in Happy Valley. I'm 1-1. You're 0-1. So
I know, terrible.
He's got that going for him. But they go on to finish 8-2 the last 10 games, wins coach of the year in a very, very difficult situation. So he has all of the pelts on the wall behind him, man. Like he is a proven commodity. And I think he is going to fit perfectly. And I talked about it. I thought that Ryan was going big game hunting. I'd heard a couple names floated around, guys from NFL, college experience. He was one of them. He lands the big fish. I think Bill O'Brien is excited to be here. How excited are you for Billy O to now be in the Woody Hayes?
I'm really excited, especially I go back to there's that quote from the Missouri head football coach talking about delegating and being more of a CEO, and we talked about it on the show. Hard to work on the business when you're working in the business, and one to be able to have somebody that sees it from a different lens, a different prism than you do when they're on the ground, and is going to shoot you straight. Like you don't want a bunch of yes men. You want people that want to stand up for it, pound the table, because guess what? That's when action happens and you can move forward very, very quickly. When you have somebody that has his pedigree of being, you know, head coach at Penn State, the Texans, OC at Alabama, New England, also working for Saban and Belichick and all the different things that he's done through his, you know, fantastic career. That's exactly what you want. I guarantee you part of it too, from the offensive side of the ball with there's a lot of synergies as to how do you call a game and what are you looking for and what kind of personnel, and evaluating the personnel that we have on our roster. And is that a fit? You know, Ryan likes to be challenged. I mean, like all coaches that want to be great want to be challenged. And you want a collaborative thing, but at the end of the day, you're the one, the buck stops with you. But you want people that are somewhat like-minded, but that will also challenge. And you also want that on your staff, because he can't necessarily be in every single offensive meeting if he has to be called out to do something else. So having somebody with that presence, having somebody with that background, that football acumen, as you will, to be able to teach, like this generation is about teaching. Coaching and teaching go hand in hand. To be able to execute the way that you want, yes, exactly, Bob. They go hand in hand. So coaches now have to be great educators. And I think that this is a great move for Ohio State. And there's still going to be some things. It's up to him. I know that Brian said, hey, you have complete autonomy to look and evaluate our staff and what you want to do on the offensive side of the ball. It also is great for the development of Brian Hartline. It also is great for a guy like Corey Dennis. It's great for everybody in there, because now you have somebody that has been there and done that at a high level, and that's what you want in the building.
Well, it's going to also help recruiting. This is one thing,
100%,
as we'll get to Julian saying from coming up from Alabama, and what his ties are. But like you said, coach for Nick Saban, coach for Bill Belichick.
Yep.
The two most successful coaches within their respective realm, and he's done it in the last 5 years. Like, and he coached with Belichick also prior, and had a lot more success, obviously, with Tom Brady the first time around. This year, I think, people are looking at their offense and like, they had, Mac Jones. I think they were a little hamstrung with what they were able to do, obviously, in some of the personnel limitations that you have, because that's what it is in the NFL. But I think, like you said, and I go back to the Nick Saban quote with players. Yep. Average players want to be left alone. Good players want to be coached. Great players want to be told the truth. It's the same thing with coaches.
Yes.
Ryan Day wants to be told the truth. They may not always be comfortable, but you have to have a guy who's comfortable enough in their own skin and confident enough in what their knowledge base is, that when I challenge you as a head coach, my boss, and I challenge in a positive way, I don't know if we should do this, or maybe we should do that, or I don't think this is going to work. And they say, why? Well, I just don't feel like it. No, no, no. Here's the body of work of why I don't think it's going to work. This is the reasons. This is why we should probably try something else. And that's a huge, huge asset to have. Very few coaches have guys that can be honest with them. And this is great because there's a connectivity there. And I think, Ryan, has respect for Belichick and everything, but it's a little bit bringing someone from outside of the tree, which I think is also a very positive point, because then you're going to get original thought and some different things. It's tough when you have guys that all work together all the time, because it's tough to get different solutions than the ones you've kind of been trained and been around to kind of find an outcome that way.
Yeah, same thing with Knowles, right? 2 years ago, boom, you shook it up, brought somebody else in, and see what happened this year on the defensive side of the ball. And it will continue to get better with the talent that we have. But that's what you got to do. And great coaches want that. I think that head coaches, right, regardless of where you are, CEOs, regardless of where you are, want people that are the content experts in their area. And you have to go find those people. And I believe that Ryan found his.
Absolutely. He did. Found it in a big way. And because you're getting Bill O'Brien, coming in as your offensive coordinator, I think that may have opened up the portal for another quarterback. We'll talk about some of the portal stuff that's coming right now, fast and furious. It's like it's coming at you thick and fast. We'll get to that. And the Ross Bjork hiring, went to his opening presser. Him, President Ted, Slapshot Carter. I thought it was a home run. I like the alignment with where these guys are and what's ultimately happening. So very excited about that. So check out all of this as we dive into this next, right here on the Bobby Carpenter Show. Welcome back into the Bobby Carpenter Show. And man, we talked about the hiring of Bill O'Brien. Now we'll dive into some player acquisition. And everybody will always tell you, it's not the X's and O's, it's the Jimmies and the Joes. You can be John Cooper, who I love, former Ohio State coach. He's like, you want to get players, famously said this. It's an unbelievable line. I want to make sure I give it its ample time. And I don't know if you've ever heard him say this, Schlegs. He goes, you want to get players that are capable of outplaying your level of coaching. If you think about it, it's like, if we call an average defense or an average offensive play, if you have someone that's capable of going out there and making it a great call because they just beat somebody one-on-one. And they're like, hey, look at that great play call. Because Terry Glenn just beat two guys. Or you had Orlando Pace wall down the three technique into the nose guard and block two at once. Or, you got Eddie George ripping off a run and breaking four tackles. Like, hey, everything works when you have great players. And so Ohio State had a bunch of guys come back. We talked about it. They're very veteran on defense. They got some veteran guys returning on offense. I think that's going to be big for the culture. One of the areas on defense you look like, hey, Cody Simon was coming back. You like that. He played a ton this year. Really wasn't the starter per se. It was with Steel Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg, but he played a ton and played really well. He's a veteran presence. He's really smart. He's checking all those boxes. He's going to be good for you. You've got some young guys in there. I know CJ Hicks, they're going to try to get on the field. He can do a little hybrid stuff, maybe some stuff off the edge. But with Lathan Ransom returning, you still have Sonny Siles. Like, okay, these could maybe be our two safeties, but you'd like to maybe try to get Sonny up in the box. Sonny Styles, folks, is about as big as me now playing safety. He's eating ice chips to stay at about 230 and probably 235. That's like Schleg's weigh in at the state meet in nothing but a jock strap, like spitting in a cup, getting down to 230 for games. He's a big dude. He's got a huge frame. He's physical. Caleb Downs was, you could argue, that maybe the best defensive player on Alabama this year as a true freshman. I don't know if you know this, Schlegs. Alabama plays pretty good defense. They were in the college football playoff. He was also their punt returner. He's a dynamic guy. He's big. He's physical. He's good in coverage. He's good in the run stopping. He can play zone. He can play man. And now he can do all that for the Ohio State Buckeyes. We were the runner-up in recruiting. Ohio State lost out to Bama. But with Nick Saban leaving, he slid back in the portal. And now he's going to be joining Ohio State. And with that, it's going to give them the ability, hopefully, this spring to maybe move Sonny up to linebacker. And so Caleb Downs, Schlegs, his impact cannot be understated of how important it can be. Not only is he a dynamic playmaker, and I think he's going to make the defense better in his own right, but he also gives you that flexibility now to probably try to get your best 11 on the field each and every play.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see how this all plays out. Like you said, CJ Hicks and doing some stuff on the defensive line and moving people around, and Sonny in the box as a will, right? Because
Yeah.
we know what Cody's game is. He's a thumper, he's a run stopper, but having a will that can be able to cover ground and run with a slot receiver, that's big time, especially somebody that even knows the back end. And back in college, we always had to where
So like
us as a
everybody loves
linebacker
to know
group,
a good back end.
no, I mean the best. But in college, we would sit down and we would talk about what they were doing with Dante and Nate and B Mitch and all these guys and just the flow of it, right? Like everybody's responsibility because again, offenses want you to have to make 3 checks. You set the front, you reload the front, and then they go in motion. Everybody has to be tied in. That's what they want you to do. Make them make 3 communications. But again, Caleb Downs, right? Freshman last year, 107 tackles as a safety, played every game this season, All-American. I mean, everything that you want from that position, especially now that Proctor's leaving. Now you have Lathan back there as well. There's a lot of different things that you can do. And again, it's only going to go add value to a defense that played as good as any defense that we've seen here recently, with still the opportunity of getting better. I mean, like, again, third down, really good. Red zone, significantly better in the red zone this past season. Passing, they were number 1 in the country. The rushing defense, again, being able to bring Sonny up and do some things on the defensive line, that's critical. Sacks, right? Now you have a guy that can blitz. You have other guys that are coming in. We were 64th in the country. That's obviously something that we have to do. But when you have the amount of talent acquisition that we have at Ohio State, whatever the position is, the rotation, let's get those numbers better because that ultimately affects our turnover margin, which is something that we have to get better on defense. And with the skill players like we have now, Caleb Downs and all the guys returning, going from 78th in the country, that's an easy way that we can improve that, which does what? Give our offense the ball back for more opportunities to score.
Oh, it's going to be huge.
Yep.
Going to be huge. And what I love about this defense now is you mentioned, Proctor's leaving, veteran guy, obviously.
Yep.
But Lathan Ransom and Cody Simon, 2 guys who are veteran, who are incredibly smart, great tackles, fundamentally sound.
Yep.
And then beside them, you get to pair those guys now with hopefully 2 elite athletes and dynamic young playmakers that you can help kind of shepherd them through some of the calls and everything that's going on, with Caleb Downs playing opposite of Lathan Ransom and Sonny Styles potentially playing opposite of Cody Simon. So those guys now, you've got kind of the best of both worlds, the experience, the knowledge, the surefire tackling. And then you also have a guy there who is a high level elite athlete. Like, and that it can't be understated. So those, and you've watched now, Sonny's a little bit of a projection at linebacker. You think that he can do it. He has all the requisite skills. It's going to be a critical spring and winter, if that's the case that they do, to move him through there so he can learn how to play in the box. And it's a little bit different with Fitz and what he's going to be asked to do, but he has all the requisite ability to get it done. So that's really big. And then the other huge signing that came recently with Bill O'Brien is Julian Saying. What you saying? Julian Saying. He was the number 1 quarterback in the class of 2024. Him and Aaron Nolan were right there. He just got to Bama, but with the departure of Nick, hopped in the portal, and now ultimately coming to Ohio State. And so now you've got a room that it looks like Will Howard, I think it's safe to say, will be the starter this year. But then behind him, you start talking about Aaron Nolan, who just got in, Julian Saying, who just got in, Lincoln Keenholtz, who just got in, and number 33, and my goodness,
Devin Brown.
Goodness, 5 guys. We went from like 2 quarterbacks
for 3, exactly,
to five dudes now. And so I think it'll be Will Howard's job. And then the rest of those guys, like, they'll be battling out this spring, battling out to be the backup. And then probably that battle, I'm guessing, will head into next spring to see who will be the starter afterwards. I can't imagine any of these guys being out Will Howard, but you never know what can happen.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, but in the room, something that we talk about all the time is competition breeds excellence. And now the hardest thing with that is there are only so many amount of reps.
Yeah.
And I go back to, Tom Brady talking about his time at Michigan and what he did. And it was like, listen, I'm just going to keep preparing. Every time they call me, I might get 2 plays. I'm going to make them the best 2 plays. But those are the type of guys that you want. And this is the opportunity that they have. So nothing is guaranteed, regardless if you're a 5-star, 4-star, or where you're on the depth chart. You got to go win the job. And so make sure every single day you're prepared to go put your best foot forward and run the show.
One of the other things Ryan did, I think some in camp this year, to try to limit practice time, like on field time, And I think it wouldn't surprise me he did it this spring, is they were running 2 fields to try to get as much reps for the younger guys as you possibly could. And so they kind of blend guys back and forth, move guys around to make sure that all those young guys are getting enough reps to be able to grow in practice. It was the first time I'd ever seen something like that done at a pretty high level, but running 2 fields in competitive situations and kind of splitting up the staffs to make sure you're giving guys additional responsibilities, challenging them as well. And I thought it worked really well. So with all of these quarterbacks, I think if you can do it, if you're healthy enough, I think that that's
Yes.
something that will also happen potentially this spring. So very excited to see that as well. But the man at the top, Gene Smith, is going to be stepping down. Ross Bjork replaced him. I talked to him a couple times as obviously his presser, and then he came on my show on the Fan. I'm really bullish on this hire. We're going to break down that next about what he means to Ohio State and what he means to the athletic department here on the Bobby Carpenter Show. All right, we're back on the Bobby Carpenter Show, and thank you for tuning in, whether it's Bally's, YouTube, all across social media. We appreciate it. If you're watching on
Yes.
YouTube, be sure to subscribe, like our stuff, leave some comments, leave some questions. We always try to get into them. We've got our tailgate talk questions coming up from you in the next segment. But right now, Schlegs, we're going to get in. For the first time in 2 decades, there will be a new man in charge of the Ohio State Athletic Department, and that man is going to be Ross Bjork. They were talking about, could they stay within the Gene Smith tree? There was Martin Jarman at UCLA. There was Heather Lyke at Pitt. Pat Chun at Washington State, who, from my knowledge, I think was the runner-up for the position potentially. And I really liked Pat and thought he had a great chance at getting it. But President Ted Slapshot Carter, call sign by the way, elects to ultimately go with Ross Bjork out of Texas A&M to be Gene Smith's replacement. I thought he had a home run at the press conference, did a fantastic job articulating his vision. They were asked a lot of tough questions, especially them about, the Jimbo Fisher contract. He didn't bring in Jimbo, but they gave him the extension. How did he, what was his explanations for that? The situation with Hugh Freeze at Ole Miss when he was there, how did he kind of talk about that? And then his vision with 36 varsity sports and what both President Carter and himself thought about Ohio State's future and how all that was going to work. It's going to be an interesting process because Gene is going to stay on until July 1st. So he is the acting AD until then. But as of like February 1, March 1, March 1, maybe, the Ross will be up here kind of shadowing him, and they'll have a great transition team so he can hit the ground running mid-year when he officially takes over. But when you first heard about this, Schlegs, you're a Texas guy. Heck, your wife went to exit. She's gigging him, man. She went to A&M. She's part of the 12th man quarterback club?
Yeah, she was a 2%er. She was a 2%er. She wasn't all in, but I'll hop in and just say this. The man, if you look at it, when he got the job as the AD for Western Kentucky, he was the youngest AD among any of the 120 FBS schools at that time. Now it's like 132 or something like that. He was at Ole Miss. He's at Texas A&M. It's been in the SEC for now quite some time. And I think what it does is he understands the landscape. We all remember about, the NIL down there and the recruiting that they did at Texas A&M. He understands the SEC, where they're going. He can help bring that to Ohio State. I've always said this too, and I like that our president, he ultimately makes the decision. He runs the university. It's not necessarily up to Gene to say, here's my replacement. So you have to go earn that position. And you're right, Bob, you and me and Pat. Obviously we've known Pat since we were at Ohio State and how highly we think of him as a man, as a leader, and as a husband. But when you look at this and when you look at the hire here, I've always said this: athletics is the front porch to your university, especially football. It's the one thing that everybody sees. And the game of college football is just on a completely different level, even than basketball. And so when you do that, you have to have somebody that understands where it's going and how to get you there. And I think that's some of the things that he's going to be.
Is that like "See You When You Get There" by Coolio? Is that what the reference?
No, that's a good one, but it could have been, though I know that song. So I just think that, where we're going from here, what he brings to the table, and understanding the landscape and understanding what Ryan is ultimately doing here for Ohio State football, it's a big hire.
It's huge because it's the first time in my memory. And I think, Gordon Gee was a football and athletics first guy. He understood like you said, it's the front porch. There's no way you can get an advertisement for 3.5 hours. We have 30 million people watching your brand rolling around. Like, I mean,
Facts.
the cost on that is astronomical. And you have that when you have an elite football program.
Yes.
And they're playing Michigan, you're playing the CFP and all those things. And so he understands that. But both Ted Carter, big sports guy, played hockey, I believe, at the Naval Academy. And then he was obviously a naval aviator, Schlegs, pilot, Top Gun pilot. But both of these guys are take charge. And I think that what I loved about it is when they were, and I think Ross Bjork's connection to the SEC and Greg Sankey is going to be pivotal. He talks about talking to Tony Petitti, who is the Big Ten commissioner, and taking an active lead. And this is something that Ohio State really hasn't done a ton. Gene started doing it a little bit more lately, but understand, like, hey, they said every voice is equal, but some voices maybe need to talk a little bit more. And Ohio State taking the lead in sculpting what probably the next 25 to 40 years of what college athletics and college football is going to look like. You were one of, if not the flag bearer in this space. And so you need to make sure that you are shaping it the way that you think it should be and in a responsible manner. And I got that alignment from both of those guys at the presser, hearing them talk about how they envision college sports looking in Ohio State's place in that negotiating table over the next couple of years.
I mean, you said need to speak more often. I would say need to speak louder because we're the one that drives the ship because of the way that our brand is. And when you have two men that are at the top of the university, being able to guide that, steer that, especially with college expansion, we're not done yet. We're expanding to 12 teams. The conferences are going to get bigger. At some point, you're going to kind of unify, and it's going to be one major conference, kind of very similar to the NFL. I could definitely see 64 teams in that, but you want to be the driving force behind that because ultimately you want your position to always be the best. You don't want to be squabbling for the shanks and then you come in
from Longshank's table, the scraps from
Longshank's table. Exactly. Braveheart reference. Yes. And so when you have that vision and you can help facilitate that with the Big Ten commissioner, because you are the biggest brand in the flag bearer, those are the type of men that you want leading the university.
Absolutely it is. And I'm excited for it. They both had, and the one thing too, Ross Bjork, do not forget this. People look at him like no Ohio ties. His mom is from outside of Findlay. And at the press conference, there was probably 30 folks that I would, without asking them, Schlegs, I'm guessing they're heavily involved in agriculture, and they had all their Ohio State jerseys on. He goes, my mom has one Facebook post of me being at A&M and 100 posts of Ohio State. So there is that connection there. He goes, we would come here and vacation here in the summer when he was younger. So he understands the gravity of what Ohio State is. His family does, the importance of it. And I think that was key. President Carter said that was a plus. It wasn't part of the requisite application set, but it is a plus, and he does have that, and I think he gets it, and I'm very excited for him to be our new AD. Coming up next, we've got our tailgate talk, our questions from you. We'll get them all answered right here on the Bobby Carpenter Show. Bobby Carpenter Show coming back at you right now. It's our favorite segment. Every week we throw them out on Twitter. Give us your questions. It's at Bobby Carp Show, at Schlegel Valley, at BCarp3. We're throwing them at you. You guys fire away. We try to get the best 3, 4, 5 questions we can. Heck, Schlegs, maybe sometime in the downtime here, we might do a full show of just your questions and get like 10 or 15 out and just bang them out over and over again, getting you the answers. But our first one comes from Sean Jimenez. What is the biggest question for the Buckeyes entering this 2024 season? The floor is yours.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the staff. What's the identity? You're going to see a lot of that in spring, but the staff that also, because we talked about teaching and educating and what is it that we're doing? We obviously know what we're doing on the defensive side of the ball. I think the rotation up front of the D line, but then what are we doing with the offensive line and who are those key people going to be? And I think that's right now going into 24. That's the biggest question.
Yeah, I would say that there's some questions on that. Defensively, I feel pretty good about everything, especially now with Caleb Downs. How that's going to look. Matt Guerreri coming in as the safeties coach, his connection with Jim Knowles, I think that's pretty locked down. My question is, okay, offensive line-wise, you brought in McLaughlin from Alabama. Does he play center? Does he play guard? How does this offensive line look? Do you grab another guy out of the portal? Bama has, I think, some offensive linemen potentially in the portal as well. Others. So could you grab them, pull them out? Do you grab a guy maybe post-spring from the portal on the offensive line. So how does that look? And then part of it is there any more movement on the offensive staff? Because that could be a possibility with Billy O'Brien coming in and Ryan giving him some autonomy to kind of sculpt that a little bit. But how does this offense look? Because I've watched Bill O'Brien do a lot of different things. He's done some 12 personnel. He's going to run some NFL style concepts. You've got Will Howard, who's a quarterback that can run.
Yes.
So you've got that element with it. So how does this offense ultimately look? Because it's going to be, and you look at Ryan, it was different with Haskins. It was different with CJ. It was different with Justin. Last year was a little different. Depends on what you have. Whether you have a lot of tight ends, you have a lot of running backs like you do this year. What does your receiver room look like? There's a lot of opportunities here, so I'm excited to see that in spring as they begin to sculpt and cultivate that. Next question. How should OSU Schlegs, this is a winner for you, focus on strength and conditioning and trench development to dominate the line of scrimmage on offense and defense this upcoming season? How do you get tougher is basically what they're asking.
Yeah, I mean, that just goes back to Mick and what he does in an elite level, and they're going to be focused on it. But it also goes back to, I remember this one thing from Mick. Yes, we are strength coaches, but at some point you're also going to be a skills coach as well. And there's certain things that you can and can't do in the off season. But, working on guys to either run the football and stop the run, every single time that they're with their coaches or within their weight training program, it's something you're harping about because we know that that's paramount. You go back and look at the Michigan game. I mean, that's how you win that football game. Every big game in the national championship game, Michigan ran for 303 yards in that game. You run the football, you stop the run. It's always the fundamentals of the game of football. And it's something that they're always going to be putting a high emphasis on.
Absolutely. Love it. Good answer there. Schlegs, I saw somewhere a sign that says the tougher you are, the tougher you get.
Facts.
So yes, but I said, what if you have zero toughness? How do you increase that? If there's a zero on the multiplier,
as Joshua Perry and some of those guys, and you know what? That's the one thing too. I would say that's different than the NFL when it is in college. And I've heard people, and yes, we're going to more of an NFL style. I wouldn't honestly, guys, be surprised that within the next 5 years that we're actually doing OTAs. But here's the thing, we're still dealing with 18 and 22-year-olds. Now, again, I'm taking out the COVID year and all that stuff. They need development. They need coaching. They need reps. They need practice, right? There's no better way than getting full contact reps. That's just facts.
Well,
and so you need all of these things.
You have two tiers of guys. You have your dudes who are going to go play 16 or 17 games to try to win a national championship. Like that's the top chunk. But then you have guys that are coming in that, especially on the offensive and defensive line, need to go through a lot of 9-on-7. They need to do pass pro. They need to work all that in pads, getting physical, bumping and grinding on dude Schlegs, and they need to get trained in a big, big way. Question coming from Lawrence Bellis. If Ryan can't win with this team, is he gone? And I would say this. I don't know if Ross Bjork is looking at it like that. He's like, I'm excited to winning a lot of championships with Ryan Day. He knows how hard it is to find a good coach. I think he believes Ryan Day is a good coach. I believe Ryan Day is a good coach.
100%. I
think Ryan understands the urgency of what needs to happen this year. And it's a 12-team playoff. You need to beat Michigan. You need to be in the playoffs. And this, I think, is a national championship caliber roster. That's why he's trying to make it, and he's helped make it that way in the portal. They maybe have a little more work to do. They've got a national championship, I believe, coaching staff on the way. And so I think that he leaned into this. And I'm not going to say it's an ultimatum winner, he's out, but I think he honestly, Schlegs, feels this as much as anybody because he's the guy that's sitting on the Iron Throne who has to take all the barbs and arrows every week if it doesn't get done.
I would say this too, one thing that people forget about. I mean, we talk about, not this year, but I mean, even this year in the Michigan game, just a couple of mistakes, you're a field goal. You're down. You're close, right? Then you go look at the field goal versus Georgia. You're close. And I mean, when you're at this level that Ohio State has put itself in, you're not chasing the 10% or the 20% to get better. You're always chasing that 1%, because that really is what separates you at the end of the day when you're winning a championship. It's the 1%. So every single year you got to, like you and I talk about, Bob, you got to self-introspect. You got to get on the board and you got to make the things that you feel are going to allow you to do that. And I also think that you can have a sense of urgency in everything that you do while also keeping it professional, because it is a marathon, not a sprint, right? Because, I mean, we're in January and they also are going to be playing all the way into next January.
Potentially 17 games, Schlegs.
It's the NFL season that we're coming up to. So all balancing all those things where you go in there, you take care of your business, you educate the players as to why we're doing what we're doing, and then you hold them to a very, very high standard, just like you do the coaches, just like you do the support staff. I'm not going to say one way or another, but I think that's what I'm seeing at Ohio State.
And the last question comes from Justin DePhillips. Where the hell is all this money coming from? Because when you're getting guys out of the portal is expensive. I've said this, I've got to dig in on this and try to figure it out because I know there was some struggling with the collectives. Things weren't in a great spot. But I believe this, when people get sick of losing and people get comfortable with winning. And I know Georgia had some hard issues with the NIL. Like, you're coming off back-to-back national championships. You're 10-0, 11-0, playing for another SEC title. Guys, we're good enough. Like, we'll be fine. If we lose one, okay. But then when you go 3 years where you haven't beaten Michigan, you've dried up, I think that there may be a little bit of a push. And that's part of Ryan's job title now too, is to reach out and have these conversations. And I'm not exactly sure where it's all coming from. I don't think it's like the Dumb and Dumber briefcase Schlegs where
I know
the IOUs everywhere.
That's a Lamborghini. You better keep that one.
Keep hanging on to that one. That's a big one. So I don't think that that's the case, but well, maybe next week that'll be an answer for you as I can kind of dig in and figure all that out. But we got to wrap this segment up. We love your questions. Always send them out. And thank you for the tailgate talk there. Coming up, we're going to wrap the show up. Some big news from the Buckeye women's hoops team as well, as they did something, man, it's unprecedented. Got a huge, huge win on Sunday. We'll tell you what that is here coming up next on the Bobby Carpenter Show. A lot of good news this weekend for the Buckeyes. Obviously, football teams are rolling in the portal, getting Bill O'Brien as the OC. We got Ross Bjork as the AD. Tons of good news this week. And maybe the biggest women's hoops game in Ohio State in the last 20 years. Over 18,000 people packed in the Schottenstein Center to watch Caitlin Clark and the Iowa Hawkeyes, the number 2 ranked team in the country, coming in at 18-1, undefeated in the Big Ten, to take on the 18th ranked Ohio State Buckeyes. They were 14-3. Well, after that, the Buckeyes, Schlegs, well, they've got one more win in the win column, and they handed Iowa their first L in conference, 100-92 in a packed house. The get in the door price, I think, was over $300. You had Marvin Harrison Jr. sitting courtside. It was slammed. It was an unbelievable environment. J.C. Sheldon lighting up, playing 45 minutes, scoring 24 points. Cody McMahon scoring 33 as they downed him 192 in overtime on Sunday afternoon, man. What a great environment.
Great win. Here's the deal, man. They shot 50% for the three-point line and they won the rebounds. You know me, Bob. I don't know crap about basketball, but box them out the gym. You get rebounds, you win the game. That's all I know. That's all I know.
So they did a great job.
Good for that. That's a huge win.
It was. Kevin McGuff, awesome dude.
Kevin McGuff, the crime dog.
Crime dog. Super excited for him. This is big. I mean, for them to play, it was not, it's a nationally televised game. People are diving in on Ohio State. Good. Last year made the NCAA tournament run, and everybody knows about Iowa and what Caitlin Clark is. And for them to be able to get a win over them at home, in front of a situation where this game has been sold out for a long time and people were juiced about it, was very, very happy for them. And so, and I believe Chris Holtman and the men's team got a win over Penn State. So a lot of good news, good vibes only this weekend for the Buckeyes. So super pumped, super excited for the athletic department. I guarantee you Ross Bjork's thinking like, okay, guys, just keep stacking wins. I don't want to come in and have to make any tough decisions. Make the job easy on me, and then we'll get it done. That's it for this edition of the Bobby Carpenter Show. Thank you for tuning in. Subscribe on YouTube. Continue to like us, and we'll hit you back next week.